You're listening to Release Your Resistance with Bex Beltran, episode 25. Welcome to Release Your Resistance. This is Bex. The only reason why any of us don't have what we want in life is because of our own resistance. Right now, I'm learning how to recognize and release my resistance, and this podcast tells you how you can release your resistance so that you can live the exact life that you want. Let's get started. It's the first Friday of June, so as usual, I want to introduce you to one of my favorite teachers. And I actually had a different episode planned for today, and you know I usually do solo episodes, but this week I am so grateful for one of my favorite teachers who agreed to join me on the podcast today. It's our first ever interview on Release Your Resistance. I would love to introduce you to Nicole Perkins. She is an Inner Voice Facilitator and a fellow Jess Lively fan. I met her because she got certified through Jess's Inner Voice Facilitator training, and I got connected with her to have her facilitate an Inner Voice session for me. Let's go to our interview. Okay, Nicole, how are you?
Hi, Bex. I am so excited to be speaking with you. I'm doing well. Thank you.
So good to hear. And thank you so much. As I was telling you before, you're actually my first interview ever on this podcast.
Wow.
And so I don't know what I'm doing, but you have a little bit more experience. Why don't you introduce yourself and just tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Nicole Perkins, and I was actually born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. So I am in the U.S. I grew up in a Christian household, but I actually started to kind of go into more spiritual work. So I've always been a very spiritual-centered person and really had my own connection with connection to all that is. So I began getting a certification in spiritual direction. And I am a follower of Jess Lively. Bex, I know you are too.
Yes.
And she's been doing inner voice work. So when she dropped the Inner Voice Facilitator training, I was like, wow, this is something that I want to do. Because in that experience of being a seeker and trying so many different things, I discovered that I have all the answers within myself. And I really just needed that permission to go, okay, Nicole, let's go deep within and feel what resonates with you. And so I'm honored now that I'm a certified Inner Voice Facilitator. And now I get to do that for other people.
I love that. And just to share, that is how we met, because you did get certified and I signed up for a session with you. Mm-hmm. And it was, I don't know that I need to get too personal about the session, but it was really, really transformative. I was crying and you were holding space for me. It was so beautiful. So I just want to thank you for doing that work too. Yeah.
And I appreciate that. It's fun for me too, honestly.
Oh yeah, I bet. You get to hear so much, I'm sure, and kind of experience it. So I want to be a little bit nosy, if you don't mind. I think I heard Jess talking about that the first round of facilitators that she was training were people who had gone through sessions with her. So was that your case? Did you go through a session yourself and have her interview your inner voice?
Yes, she did. So that was part of the stipulations, is that she had to have a session with us just so that we could see what it would be like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how was that?
So 2 hours with her.
Oh my.
It was actually, for me, it was very intense. Yeah. I did a lot of releasing tension. I actually was on all fours, because in these sessions you can get as comfortable as you want. It's no video, it's all audio. Yeah. So when I was releasing, I would kind of lay down and then I'd kind of get into a child's pose and just release. And so I was able to release quite a bit and get some really good insight into my voice.
Oh, so good. So I have heard her talking about emotional beanbags, and then I've heard it also described as the pain body too, that Eckhart Tolle talks about. Is that the phrase or the terminology you use, or would you describe it differently, or what do you think about what is that?
That's a really good question. I'm more familiar with Jess's terminology, so I call it an emotional beanbag. And so really what that is that that's any time we feel discomfort or tension, pain, resistance in the body.
Mm. Yeah. Do you equate that with like our ego's resistant, like the thoughts that we get telling us, don't do this, you shouldn't, it's not your place, you're not good enough, those kind of thoughts? Or do you think that's just something else? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so right now I do think it definitely starts with our thoughts. And then from there, those thoughts seep down and then they create tension in the body. So I
Mm.
do see a connection with the thoughts and the beanbags.
Yeah, so interesting. So, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this week is because of everything that's happening in our world. And I think, like you said earlier, I totally believe that the answers we seek are inside of us. And I think so many people right now are looking outward for answers and just want to know what to do or what we should do or what we can do or what is the right answer. So what can we do? Like, with our own inner voice, do you recommend people work with a inner voice facilitator? Do you recommend people tap into their own inner voice? What do you think?
This is such a really good question. Um, and I love this because, I can't say, right?
Mm,
So what I would do is the guidance I would give is to definitely go within. So what that looks like, it could be a few different things. If you are already an intuition-led person, you can just feel in your intuition and just feel what resonates with you and just play around with the question of asking, all right, inner voice, intuition, inner being, higher self, whatever you want to name it, what would you like me to do right now? And when I hold sessions, usually inner voices always say, just be still
mm,
and be in the now. Um, and then also, one way that I started talking to my inner voice was writing to it.
mm-hmm.
And just to really prepare for our talk today, I actually wrote to my inner voice today. And I love writing to my inner voice. So what you can do is just get a journal, write questions, and then the answers can just flow. And if this is new for you, just take your time, be patient, and what you'll start to see is you'll start to see cases of evidence where your inner voice has told you something, or maybe it's picked like a meal for you to eat or an outfit for you to wear, a decision. And so the more you follow that intuition, the more evidence you're going to build to actually live a more intuition guided life.
Yeah, I have experienced that exact same thing too. I mean,
Awesome.
from Jess is where I learned writing to my intuition. And once I started doing it, I definitely get those kind of messages as well. And yeah, it's always good advice. It
I
never
love
leads
it.
me astray. Yeah. So that is such a good reminder. I'm curious, just in your normal day to day conversations, but also in your work with your clients, do people have maybe not on purpose, but maybe like an unintentional resistance to like going down into their inner voice, like their ego just won't let them, or they just don't think it's possible, or they just don't believe? Have you experienced that at all?
I've experienced a little bit of it, but what's interesting is that all of them who felt that maybe at the beginning of the session have released that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had peers, in the certification that have experienced that, but I actually have not yet. Everyone's
Okay.
been able to get in touch and get connected.
Yeah, that's really good. I find that for myself, whenever I'm writing to my intuition or inner voice, Sometimes my ego is definitely driving and is like, no, stay up here,
Mm.
stay up here.
Okay, so
So,
I want to speak to that. The advice that I got that's really good is that when it's the ego starts to chime in,
yeah,
ask another question.
yeah,
And what we were taught is to keep asking. And, sometimes what we do or the ego does is that it'll just quit, and it'll just stop and go, okay, maybe this just isn't going to work. And so just keep going. Just keep pressing, keep asking until you get an answer. And
yeah.
don't be afraid to ask.
Sometimes me or maybe some other people might give up or quit without knowing that advice that you just shared. Just like keep trusting and
Mhm.
keep going and keep asking, because it might feel very uncomfortable, and it might, so it might be like, let me just go, maybe it's time to go, instead of
Yeah.
sitting down and just being in it and feeling it and going with it. Yeah. So when you were describing your kind of transition from your growing up and kind of getting into the more maybe we could call it woo realm, is that a way that you would describe it?
Yeah.
Or
I
yeah,
love that.
did you ever get interested in tarot?
Yes, I actually have a few decks. I haven't used them recently, but I went through a phase where I used them a lot.
Yeah. I just wondered when you were kind of describing how you got into inner voice work and how you believe that the answers are inside of us, because I totally agree with that. And I always think of the high priestess whenever that comes up. And I don't know if you have any experience with that or any kind of special um, connection with that card, the high priestess.
Oh, I don't, but that's beautiful. Like I can think of that card right now and
Yeah.
go, I get it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah. I
makes
mean,
perfect sense.
she's the one I really like to kind of compare and contrast the three really dominant, strong female cards for me, the way that I see it, the high priestess, the empress, and then the nine of pentacles, that they're all
Mm.
really powerful women, but for different aspects, and they bring out different things. And I just think the high priestess is the one who knows, she has this inner knowledge, and she crushes doubt. That moon is right under her foot, and she's just like, I know it. I got the secret to the universe right inside of me. And I think that's kind of the work that you do. You help people tap into that way.
Wow. I love that. I'm like, oh, I need a reading from Bex.
Yeah, we should. That'd be interesting.
I love that analogy.
I like to think of it that way. And I like to think of my own inner voice too as like someone who always wants what's best for me and always the
Mm.
right answer. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can also explain like the difference between, and you can help me here, the ego and the inner voice. Because the inner voice, like you said, it's always loving.
Mm.
It always tells clients that they're safe. It's connected to all that there is. It's kind of like that God version of
Mm-hmm.
you. Infinite wisdom. Sometimes I call it a genius.
Yeah.
It's a poet, right? Like it's amazing. And then you have the ego and the mind, and that gets a little chatty and repetitive and can be
Yeah.
negative.
One teacher, I don't know if you've studied or followed, Martha Beck.
I've heard of Martha Beck, but I haven't
Yeah.
um, studied her.
Yeah, I think she usually has a column in Oprah, although I haven't read that column, but I think that's why a lot of people, her name sounds familiar. But she has this concept, which I equate it to the ego and the inner voice too. It's the social self and the essential self. And so our essential
Mm.
self is like who we are at the core. And the social self is as we grew up and became socialized, like what we did to fit in, to please people, to be part of society, to think this is the way it is, and so as we grew up and got older, we closed off our essential self more and more and more, and we stepped into the social self because that's what we were socialized to do. And so I equate that also with the ego, because it cares about what other people think, it cares about what should be or what is expected, or what will
Mm-hmm.
keep us safe kind of from harm. Although it won't keep us safe really, because it's actually sometimes damaging, because it's not letting us be our essential self.
Yeah, that's true. I like that visual, and I feel like that perfectly describes what I do. I actually just did a session today, And literally I was like, wow, like all it is like what you said, is just dropping that social self and just letting that essential self shine as brightly as it was designed to shine.
Yeah. What other things have you noticed or have come up for you, or what other advice do you have for people because you do this work and because you have this insight?
Oh, that's a very good question. The biggest advice I have is that from the inner voice perspective, there is no right or wrong. And when our mind hears that, it's like, what?
Yeah.
There is no right or wrong. There is no correct or incorrect path. Like, we are so supported and we are loved like, beyond our mind's ability to wrap our heads around it and conceptualize the love that we have, and that we are truly allowed to just show up as ourselves, and that in showing up as ourselves is good enough. It's just fine. It's perfect.
Yeah. As a coach, I work with my clients, and I don't think people believe that. And I think probably sometimes I question that too, so how can we remember that on a day-to-day and incorporate that?
That's a very good question, Bex. I just got a little idea.
Yeah.
We could ask your inner voice,
Yeah.
if you're open. Put you on the spot. Or
Yeah.
you could ask me.
Well, yeah, we could ask each other. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let me try and zone down a little bit.
So go ahead. We're going to allow her to get comfy and cozy. I put her on the spot. So
Yeah.
And there's a lot of breathing. So she's going to place her awareness in her heart, kind of dropping out of the mind, and allowing that exhale to come out. All right, Beck. So if you were to ask your inner voice that question, what feeling or answer do you feel?
Practice.
Practice. Inner voice, is that good enough to practice?
It is a practice.
Is there anything that she has to do, inner voice?
Practice.
Practice, inner voice. Can she mess up, inner voice?
No.
And get it wrong?
Just more practice.
Just more practice. What does practice look like for Beck's inner voice?
Remembering, noticing, watching, always with compassion.
That's beautiful, inner voice. Thank you.
Thank you. That was
I know I put you on the spot, but that was lovely.
Okay. I like it. That's good. And it's so interesting, and I'm sure that, I know I felt this when I was doing my session with you, and I know I feel this when I do my own writing, and I'm wondering if your other clients feel this too, is at the really, really beginning, especially knowing that this is recorded and going to be published, my mind just wanted to be there and be like, hold on, well, let me explain. That first word, when I said practice, it wanted to give context and make it, just explain everything and give it a disclaimer. That's normal, right? That our minds would want to maintain control.
And I loved how you stayed steadfast with the word practice, and you didn't try to add anything to it. That's all you got, and that's all you said.
There was a lot more from my brain. There was, you know what I mean? It wanted to explain and disclaim and offer and describe. And I just, like you said, I just had to.
Yep. And you kept speaking from the inner voice. So yeah.
Ah, so beautiful. Well, I didn't want to take too much of your time today. And I could talk to you all day, obviously. But is there something else that you would like to share with us or offer or remind us of or advocate for or anything else?
Sure.
Before we go?
Yeah. So to speak to the climate that we're in right now, I know it's a sensitive time for Blacks. I'm comfortable using that word, but it's also a sensitive time for everyone. And what I love about the work I can do is that I can give everyone, no matter race, the permission to feel however they feel and understand that there is absolutely nothing you have to quote unquote do unless it is guided by your own intuition, unless it resonates with you and it's from a heartfelt place. And, I feel like this is a time where we all can shine and we all can share no matter who we are. And I know that's a very controversial statement to say because, the trend right now on social media is promoting Black voices. And yes, we can promote Black voices, but yet we can also hold space for other people at the same time. I do think there's a way to do it all at the same time. So yeah, and you can follow me.
Good to hear.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just want to thank you for offering that. And because I think me and many people are wondering, how do I've been hearing silence is violence, and I agree. And then I also hear it's time for me to mute myself and amplify other voices. And I agree. So I thank you for offering that allowing and consideration that people can think about that. Definitely. Yeah, but you were going to say how we can find you, maybe how we can work with you.
Sure. You can follow me on Instagram. So that's at metaphysicalme_. And have a couple of different offerings. I do the inner voice work, the classic session. But right now I'm also doing a healing emotional dissonance is what I'm calling it. And it's an inner voice session around the emotional release, so the being bags, the releasing of the tension and the resistance, but also kind of implementing some talk with the inner voice around race and around the climate right now. And so I just had a session and oh my gosh, we were both in tears by the end of it. It was so healing for her, but I wasn't expecting for it to be so transformative for myself. Yes. So I'm still in shock.
Oh, wow. Good. I'm so glad that you're doing this. And I think so many people would be so helped by it. So I'm so glad that you are sharing your gift and your work and your, studies and everything that you've put into it so that other people can benefit from it too.
Yeah. And thank you for inviting me on and giving me this platform and this space to speak. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Nicole. It was such a pleasure speaking with you. And to continue my tradition of recording a thank you card, love note, and fan letter for my favorite teacher in each of these episodes, Nicole, if you're listening, and I'm guessing you probably are, thank you so much for making yourself available to share your thoughts, your wisdom, your insight, your gifts, and your time with me and with all of the listeners to this podcast. You are truly gifted and talented at what you do, and I'm sure that anyone who takes you up on your offer to work with you will find the answers they seek inside of them with your help, your guidance, and your gifts as you lead them to tap into their own intuition. You have such an easy and approachable manner that I am sure that even someone who's nervous or not sure or maybe even scared about what they may uncover will feel safe and supported with you as their guide. I also appreciate your generosity and kindness in taking time away from yourself, your work, and your own self-care during this stressful time to so freely and openly share your perspective and your experience. You are such a gracious, talented, and generous teacher, and I am so honored that you have been my first podcast interview. And that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed meeting and hearing from one of my favorite teachers. And if you're one of my favorites, meaning that you're on my email list, I am sending you an excerpt of some of the inner voice writing I did right after my first session with Nicole, just to give you an example of how my inner voice shows up for me, with the hopes that you will try this practice for yourself. And if you feel compelled to share, let me know what you hear from your inner voice. And if you're not on my email list yet, you can join at beckspeed.org/favorites so that you get an email from me with each new episode, along with other extras that I always include for all of my favorite people. Please reach out to Nicole and book a session with her. It will be an enlightening experience for you. I can't wait to hear about it. Thank you again for listening, and I will talk to you next week. This has been Release Your Resistance. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, think about someone who you know who would love this episode and share it with them. There should be a share button on your app if you're listening to this on your phone. If you'd like to continue this conversation one-on-one or in real time, come visit me on my site at beckspeed.org to see how we can work together.